name is Joan Meier. I'm a professor of clinical law here at GW Law School. I find that my research is very much fueled by practice, which is why I'm a clinical professor as opposed to a stand-up professor. My practice has come both from my clinical teaching and from a nonprofit I founded in 2003, which is called DV Leap, the Domestic Violence Legal Empowerment and Appeals Project. DV Leap specializes in taking appeals on behalf of victims of domestic violence, all different kinds of cases, all around the country and in the Supreme Court, and sometimes on behalf of the survivor herself, and sometimes as a friend of the court brief on behalf of a number of organizations. And in that work, I have found that the most compelling problem right now, especially in this country, but not only in this country, in the field of domestic violence is the problem of mothers who are trying to protect their children in the context of litigation with their abuser over custody. What we know is that abusers do not let their victims leave, and that if their victims do leave, they often move the battle to the courts, and the best possible battle for an abuser is to fight over the children, because the best way to hurt their adult victim is to take the children away, and in the worst cases sometimes to harm or even kill the children. We've seen that more often than many people realize. So what a lot of my research has really focused on in the last 10 years has been around what's going wrong in the courts, and why it is that the courts are not understanding what's going on when women come to court in custody cases and say he's dangerous to the children. Why it is that the courts aren't believing her, are believing his denial, and are sending many, many thousands of children into harm's way. And we find this again all over the country, not in one jurisdiction, not in uneducated judges, but it's just rampant. Most of my research has focused on particular doctrines that are being misused in the context of those kinds of cases. In particular, a theory called parental alienation or parental alienation syndrome, which is the idea that when mothers come to court and say that the father is dangerous to the children, she's only doing that to alienate the children from their father, and not because it's true. And while the idea sounds kind of obviously a way of simply denying abuse, which may be true once in a while, but not in the majority of cases, stunningly, this idea has really taken over family courts across the country, and they have adopted it. And one reason it's been so powerful is that it's been propounded not only by the abusers, but also by evaluators who are often appointed as neutrals, who the courts put a lot of trust in. The evaluators tend to also be snowed by the abusers and think that if he's crying, or he's sad, or he's kind seeming, or if he seems to love his children, or whatever it is, if I like him, he can't be doing these horrible things she accuses him of. And so we have very, very poor, in fact, destructive and dangerous evaluations going on that courts are relying on. And children are being sent into harm's way at great rates. So my research has really been trying to deconstruct this theory, both in terms of how it's misused in court, both by telling stories about cases I've worked on and known about, and also by looking at the underlying research, because courts think this is a scientific theory, and these evaluators are psychologists, and they present it as though it's a scientific theory, but in fact there's virtually no science underlying this use of this theory. In fact, there's virtually no science underlying the theory at all. There's a lot of publications that get cited, but no actual empirical proof that there is such a thing as parental alienation that has the impact that they claim it does. So my articles are really aimed at both the judges and the evaluators, talking about why this theory is incorrect and wrong and misused and is misleading judges, and inviting courts to find ways, and I lay out ways that they could still entertain the possibility that abuse claims are false and objectively assess those claims without falling into the rabbit hole of parental alienation and denying true abuse. My most recent research I'm very excited about, because for the first time it's actually empirical, and I think it's going to support, when it's completed, I hope that it will support the gender critique of parental alienation. Those of us in the field of gender-based violence know that parental alienation is used against women. Almost the vast majority of its uses are against women, but it is presented as though it's gender neutral. So the analysis that I did with the help of a great intern last summer is to look at all the published decisions in the country, in the courts of appeal across the country, that involve alienation claims and abuse claims in custody cases, and just look at outcomes. Look at when those claims coexist, who wins, and what findings the court makes about abuse or about alienation. And we're getting some very interesting results, which are very confirmatory of our own experiential view that this is a very gendered doctrine. In particular, the most powerful finding we found was that when mothers allege child sexual abuse, without fail, they lose custody in these cases. And it is a mixture of courts not wanting to believe child sexual abuse, which we've known, and a believing that that is emblematic of parental alienation, which of course we believe is a false use of that concept. So that and a variety of more nuanced findings I think are going to be very powerful in getting courts to reevaluate how they're using parental alienation and helping advocates who need to cite good research to show that the theory is invalid.